Hi, I'm Nicola McKenzie, founder and mortgage advisor at Dunham McCarthy Mortgages, and in today's episode I'll be talking to you about getting a mortgage if you are over 40, so stay tuned. Now, before we get into the detail of today's video, guys, we here are mortgage specialists and house buying specialists. So age should not be a barrier to becoming a homeowner. And therefore, we can help you to explore your options if you are over 40 and you're perhaps worried about how your age may or may not impact you in relation to either getting onto the housing ladder or remortgaging, or if you're a home mover. We can help. There are lots of high street lender options that we can look at with you, as well as specialist lenders that are very, very familiar with dealing with all sorts of situations and ages of clients. We've helped lots of clients over 40 to get onto the housing ladder or become a home mover and move up or down the ladder as well. So head over to our website and book in for a free of charge appointment today and see how we can help. But for today's video, the first thing I want to talk about with you is just some general key points to think about if you are over 40 and looking at getting a mortgage or a remortgage. So many people assume that their age is a barrier to getting a mortgage simply because they're over 40, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So if you are over 40, because I do get a lot of people call me and say, I'm over 40 and I'm worried that this alone is going to mean I cannot get a mortgage. And that is just not how it works. So there's the first positive point to mention. Now, being a first-time buyer or a home mover, if you're again over 40, shouldn't be an issue, because many lenders factor in your age at the end of the mortgage term rather than at the beginning. Now, what you have to bear in mind as well, mortgages in the main are predominantly based on your income, your outgoings, obviously your credit history and many other factors. But the point here is the term of the mortgage. That is really what we have to pay attention to, potentially when we're aged over 40. Now, if you were planning to retire while you're still paying off a mortgage, then you need to prove that your post-retirement income is sufficient to keep up with those mortgage repayments, okay? And that is sometimes where it can become a tricky part if you are over 40. So now let's look at how the term of the mortgage will impact on you if you are over 40. Now, the maximum term will depend again on personal circumstances. Majority of lenders will allow a mortgage to run up until the age of 70, assuming that 70 is your retirement age. If your retirement age is sooner than 70, then that's fine. But again, you're going to need to prove how you're going to support that income beyond those years. And if you haven't got a pension, or if your pension isn't looking sufficient to support it, then that could be problematic. Now, if you are planning on retiring at 70 and you haven't got any retirement income or any means of evidencing that, then that is fine with the majority of lenders. So if you're 40 years old, then that could still mean a 29-year mortgage term without an issue, without getting into the realms of having to prove pension income, and 29 years is still plentiful for most people. Now, I say if you're 40, 29 years is okay with most lenders, because 29 years, even though if you're 40, getting to 70 is 30 years, but most banks that will allow the mortgage to run until 70 without retirement income will expect the mortgage to finish before your 70th birthday. So in that instance, it would likely be a 29-year mortgage. But what you've got to bear in mind is that the options and the assessment criteria to qualifying for that, if you're 40 or even over 40, would be exactly the same as if a 25-year-old was applying for a 29-year mortgage. So you can see the point I'm making is that age isn't a factor alone necessarily in terms of impacting on your ability to get that mortgage. Now, it's worth me mentioning that some mortgage lenders will even allow you to run a mortgage up until the age of 75 without having to prove post-retirement income. Again, though, this is potentially a problem because it depends on what you do for a living as to how viable it is that you could work until the age of 75. An accountant would find it much easier to prove that they're able to work until the age of 75 compared to someone that does a very heavy manual job for a living, as an example. So it could be difficult to justify being a builder till the age of 75 compared to if you're an accountant. But again, it does vary depending on the lender and the situation. But nonetheless, there are some lenders that will allow the mortgage to even run until 75 with very little or no pension proof, as I mentioned. So it's potentially an option. And in which case, if you were 40, then that could even potentially mean a 34-year mortgage term. Again, if you have very little or no evidence of a pension. So there are options. So just to reiterate, all of this is really down to individual assessment. Now, obviously, depending on your retirement age, like I stressed earlier, that might mean a shorter mortgage term, in which case, depending on how much you're wanting to borrow from the banks, then that could mean a higher mortgage payment. But again, until we really sit down and explore all of the options with you, it's very difficult to say how that will look for your individual circumstances. And just to make a final point, if you're looking at stretching that mortgage potentially beyond the age of 75, then yes, that will usually always require proof of pension income, because to justify working with most lenders anyway, to justify, retiring past the age of 75, that's going to be quite tricky. So if the mortgage is running beyond the age of 75, then usually pension income is required. But again, that's going to vary, or how much pension income is going to vary amongst lenders, and as well how that looks is again down to every bank. They all have different criteria on what evidence they need. So you really, really need to get specialist advice. Now I want to talk a little bit more about additional options for those that might be aged over 55, because if you're aged over 55, then there are many options in relation to what's called a lifetime mortgage, and this can actually even remove the need for you to be making mortgage repayments. So with a lifetime mortgage, it's usually less dependent on your income and instead based on your health, the value of the property, and a few other criteria points that you must meet. But ultimately, if there is an issue in terms of the income that you can prove, then a lifetime mortgage is a very viable and popular option. So the general gist of a lifetime mortgage is that the clue is in the name, it runs for a lifetime. So let's say that you took out a lifetime mortgage for £100,000. You'll pay off the interest when the house is sold, generally speaking. And that would usually be upon death or another life event, such as if you had to go into care, for example. Now, the one main consideration with a lifetime mortgage is that that can reduce the potential inheritance that was due to pass on to children or other family members. So that is something to think about. Obviously, if you've got a mortgage on the property when you pass away, then that's going to potentially reduce how much you would have passed on to your children. So that is obviously something that you might want to think about. But there are lots of other instances that a lifetime mortgage can also be really useful. So for example, let's say that your children or next of kin want early inheritance. I don't know, perhaps they're struggling to get together a house deposit for themselves, or they might want to settle a residential mortgage of their own. So advancing their inheritance whilst you're still alive might be a really viable option to help them get onto the housing ladder sooner. Also, if you've got, I don't know, let's say a big expense such as a holiday to pay for, or you want to make some home improvements, or provide a lump sum if you wanted to buy a pension annuity, for example, then raising money through a lifetime mortgage can also be a really good option. Not to mention if you wanted to potentially look at buy-to-let property, again, as a way to fund your retirement income, then a lifetime mortgage can again be really useful in those circumstances. But as with every option here, guys, this is really about speaking to a professional, because there are pros, there are cons, and every option will depend on your circumstances as to what the best way forwards potentially would be. So that's it for today's video, guys. I really just wanted to touch on some of the options that are there for over 40s. Like I said, really stress the point that if you're over 40, because I get a lot of calls from people that are over 40 that say, can I even get a mortgage? You know, is this possible? They feel that their age is perhaps a negative factor, and that's far from the case. So if you're one of those people, don't worry about your age. You really need to sit down with ourselves and get in touch, for us to look at the options based on your individual circumstances. You know, it's very difficult to summarise in a video whether or not you would qualify for a mortgage, in the same way that it is for any mortgage applicant, because a mortgage, irrespective of your age, is always based on your individual circumstances. So I'm not saying that age is not going to potentially be a factor to consider. Yes, it will. Like I said, that is going to dictate how long the mortgage can run. But ultimately, even if you are approaching retirement, there are still other options that we can potentially consider for you. So get in touch, head over to our website, book in for a free of charge appointment today, and let's help you and look at the options with you. And I will look forward to seeing you in my next video, and I hope that was useful.